Imagine it's 1973. The world feels uncertain. You've just spent 2 hours in a gas line watching the numbers on the pump rise higher than you've ever seen before. At home, the grocery bill is climbing week after week, and it feels like, no matter how hard you work, your paycheck doesn't stretch far enough. Families across America are tired, stressed, and worried. And yet, in kitchens from small towns to big cities, something remarkable was happening. Out of necessity, out of scraps, and out of love, meals were created that not only filled stomachs, but lifted spirits. These weren't just recipes. They were lifelines, they were traditions, and they were memories carved into the heart of a struggling nation. Tonight, we're going back in time to rediscover 10 forgotten dishes that carried America through the 1970s gas crisis. They weren't fancy, they weren't luxurious, but they fed families, they brought people together, and, in their own way, they saved America's dinner table. 1. Brown bean chowder. The first dish we have to talk about is brown bean chowder. If you grew up in the 70s, chances are you remember the smell of beans simmering all day long on the stove. This was the meal of survival, simple, hearty, and endlessly adaptable. Families would buy a bag of dried beans for pennies, soak them overnight, and cook them slowly with onions, garlic, and maybe, if you were lucky, a leftover ham bone or some bacon ends for flavor. It wasn't just soup. It was a warm hug in a bowl. Picture it. A cold autumn evening. The house a little too quiet. Your parents worried about bills and fuel. But then you sit down at the table, and that first spoonful of hot chowder warms you right through. Kids didn't see beans and water. They saw comfort. Adults knew better. They saw survival food stretched as far as it could go. And maybe that's what made brown bean chowder so powerful. It was proof that even when times were hard, you could turn almost nothing into something worth sharing. 2. Tater tot chicken pot pie casserole. Now, if you were a kid back then, you probably got excited on nights when dinner wasn't soup, but casserole. And one of the most beloved creations of the time was the tater tot chicken pot pie. Traditional pot pies required pie crusts and fresh vegetables, things that were either expensive or hard to come by during the crisis. So moms got creative. They replaced that crust with crispy golden tater tots layered on top of a creamy filling of chicken, peas, and carrots. The smell of this dish coming from the oven was enough to make kids run to the table before it was ready. You dig in with a spoon, breaking through that crunchy potato top, only to find rich, savory chicken and vegetables hidden underneath. It was filling, cheap, and felt indulgent when money was tight. For parents, it was practical. For kids, it was magic. To this day, people still call this one of the ultimate comfort casseroles of their childhood. 3 cocktail wieners in saucy glaze. Of course, not every dish was about survival. Some were about joy. Even in hard times, people found reasons to celebrate. And no party in the 1970s was complete without cocktail wieners in saucy glaze. These little bite-sized hot dogs simmered in a mix of ketchup, brown sugar, and sometimes even grape jelly or mustard. The result? Sticky, sweet, tangy bites that you couldn't stop eating. Picture a church basement potluck or a birthday party in the neighborhood. Paper plates, kids running around, adults chatting in the corner, and in the middle of it all, a crock pot full of these little sausages. They weren't fancy, but they brought laughter, joy, and normalcy to people who desperately needed it. Food like this reminded families that even in crisis, life could still be sweet, literally. 4. Icebox macaroni. Salad. Then there were the nights when families couldn't even afford to keep the stove running. That's when dishes like Icebox macaroni salad came to the rescue. This was a summer staple, but it became a year-round lifesaver. A big bowl of cooked macaroni noodles tossed with mayonnaise, celery for crunch, onions for bite, and just a hint of mustard for tang. It was the kind of dish that sat in the fridge for days, feeding a whole family meal after meal. It was cheap, it was filling, and it required no reheating, saving precious fuel during the gas shortage. For kids, it was creamy, cool, and comforting. For parents, it was relief. This dish didn't just fill plates, it bought families peace of mind in uncertain times. And let's be honest, who hasn't snuck a spoonful of leftover macaroni salad straight from the fridge at midnight? 5. Pineapple glazed chicken. One of the most creative ways families brought a little luxury to the table was with pineapple glazed chicken. Canned pineapple was affordable and easy to find, and when paired with brown sugar and soy sauce, it turned plain chicken into something exotic and exciting. Moms would lay pineapple rings on top of chicken thighs or drumsticks, pour over the glaze, and let it caramelize in the oven until the whole house smelled like sweet tropical sunshine. For many families, this dish felt like dining out, without ever leaving home. It was festive, cheerful, and gave people a sense of escape from their daily struggles. Imagine sitting down to a plate of sticky, sweet, tangy chicken paired with plain white rice and feeling, just for a moment, like life wasn't so hard after all. 6. Tuna casserole with potato chips. If there's one dish that almost every family remembers from the gas crisis, it's tuna casserole topped with potato chips. This was the ultimate budget meal. A couple of cans of tuna, a can of cream of mushroom, soup, some noodles, and whatever vegetables you could spare. Topped with crushed potato chips, it came out of the oven bubbling, golden, and irresistible. Kids loved cracking through that crunchy topping to get to the creamy noodles beneath. Parents loved that it cost almost nothing to make and could stretch to feed the whole family. It wasn't glamorous, but it was comforting. And when money was tight, that kind of comfort meant everything. People still make this casserole today, not just out of nostalgia, but because it remains one of the cheapest and most satisfying meals you can serve. 7. Green bean casserole. Another classic that carried through the 1970s was green bean casserole. This dish had been around since the 1950s, but it took on new meaning during the gas crisis. Fresh produce was expensive, so families relied on canned green beans, cream of mushroom soup, and fried onions from a can. Put it all together, and you had a hot, creamy, savory dish that tasted like tradition. It wasn't just for holidays. It showed up at weeknight dinners, too. For many families, it was a taste of home, a reminder that even if money was tight, you could still sit down together and share something warm and familiar. Green bean casserole wasn't about luxury. It was about holding on to tradition when everything else felt unstable. 8. Salmon patties. When meat prices soared, families turned to the humble can of salmon. Salmon patties became a staple because they were affordable, versatile, and hearty. Mixed with breadcrumbs, onions, and eggs, then fried in a hot skillet, they came out crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. Served with ketchup or a squeeze of lemon, they were filling enough to replace more expensive meats. The sound of patties sizzling in a cast-iron pan, the smell filling the kitchen, it became a memory that stuck with an entire generation. For families who couldn't afford steak or pork chops, these salmon patties stood in proudly. They weren't second best. They were simply what survival looked like, dressed up to taste like comfort. 9. Zebra Icebox cake. Of course, no list would be complete without dessert. And one of the most magical desserts of the 1970s was the Zebra Icebox cake. Made from layers of graham crackers or chocolate wafers, whipped cream, and pudding, it was. Chilled overnight in the fridge until the crackers softened into cake-like layers. When it was sliced, the cross-section revealed stripes, earning it the name zebra cake. For kids, this dessert was pure magic. They'd open the fridge a dozen times, begging to eat it early, but the longer it sat, the better it tasted. It was cheap, easy, and endlessly fun. In the middle of a crisis, it was proof that patience could bring sweetness. 10. Watergate Salad. Finally, we have the quirkiest dish of them all, Watergate Salad, a fluffy green mix of pistachio pudding, crushed pineapple, mini marshmallows, and whipped topping. On paper, it sounds strange, maybe even unappetizing. But in practice, it was a hit at potlucks, holidays, and church socials. It was light, sweet, and playful. For families tired of bad news, this odd little salad brought laughter to the table. It reminded people that food didn't always have to be serious. It could be fun, colorful, and a little silly, and maybe that's exactly why people loved it. These dishes weren't about extravagance. They were about survival, about making do, and about finding joy in the middle of struggle. They carried families through the gas crisis not just because they were cheap, but because they were comforting. They reminded people that even in the hardest times, food could bring families together, laughter could be found at the dinner table, and love could be served on a plate. So, which of these forgotten dishes do you remember? Which one would you bring back today? Share your memories in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe because here on The America We Forget, every meal is a story worth remembering.